To put it to you bluntly, some of the legislation that's coming out of Washington, some of the executive actions that are taking place, ladies and gentlemen, these things started a revolution 200 years ago and got this country started. And the people are seeing this. The national news media and the actions of this government is some of the best recruitment we could have.
The Secret Service steps in. The man led away in handcuffs and hopefully taken one of those secret prisons in Eastern Europe, never to be heard from.
Oh, I hope that happens.
Okay. We can only hope.
Popular speech, the First Amendment doesn't need to be defended. It's unpopular speech is why we have that amendment.
So they disarmed Americans over some bad weather, as though the bad weather suspended the Second Amendment. So that's the most recent example.
All right, but it was a little bit more than that. I mean, the local authorities in New Orleans could not control what was going on in the city, and you had looters who were armed going in and stealing things.
It wasn't just looters they were disarming. They disarmed average American people, just average American
No, they had disarmed everybody. They basically said, there's not going to be any guns in the city, and we're going to take them all because we're in a state of emergency. But that's after a hurricane wipes out the city, so I'm not sure. But let me ask you this.
Where's that in the Constitution that says that bad weather suspends the Constitution?
It's not a matter of bad weather. It's a matter of can't control the city.
We don't have to say much. All you have to do is talk to the average person out there to tell you, how do you feel about your government? And the people you look at here, we're the calm ones. We're the ones that calm people down.
They have ammunition for their beliefs, but what they do with their beliefs is destructive, not constructive. We're talking about groups like the Oath Keepers, the Constitution Party, and the John Birch Society. We are not talking about some of the centrist Tea Partiers or other populist groups.
Now, you can see from the last 2 years of sales from the firearms producers in this country, this nation is probably one of the most heavily armed forces on earth. And I have heard more and more people say, if one of these black-suited, armor-wearing, state-sponsored terrorists come kicking down my door, I'm going to blow somebody away. They don't call themselves militia. They don't even call themselves patriots. They call themselves American citizens who are getting tired of confiscatory tax rates, increasingly legislation, increasingly heavy regulations, which is they believe are leading them down a path to involuntary servitude. When all of these wonderful politicians, God love them, say whatever they're going to say, and they get inside the Beltway and everything is, how do we say, politics as usual? Now what's going on as this trend continues, and you guys got to listen to this, you're pushing people's backs against the wall out there. We got people out there hungry, like I'm talking about, people out there starving, and people tired of getting terrorized by law enforcement. Well, I shouldn't say law enforcement. I will support law enforcement whenever they support the law. I'll just call them enforcement. They're getting outright economically terrorized, socially terrorized. I mean, the political correctness is getting out of hand.
I would say that disarming an average law-abiding citizen blanket like that.
No state of emergency. Now, I'm just saying, I'm just talking state of emergency.
Okay, so you call it state of emergency. Call it what you want. It's still unconstitutional.
That's a pretty extreme position.
What you have are these groups who are organizing themselves in a manner that the Constitution will be preserved, no matter what kind of action this government or any other government takes. That's the little friction point you're going to run into there. There's people drawing the line in their sand. That's what it is. Nobody's going to go out there and shoot things. Nobody's going to go out there and blow up things. We're not baby killers. We're baby boomers. We're not terrorists. We're taxpayers. We're not extremists. We're just extremely ticked off at the way the government is deviating away from what's going on around here. And when I say we, as this militia, as this little covert group out there, no, it's everybody.
Here's what I would do if I was a terrorist. I would foreclose on millions of homes, you know, kick folks out of their houses. I would devalue the dollar so the price of everything would go up. I would outsource their jobs so they couldn't find work. I would move the factories to foreign countries, you know, all of the good-paying factory jobs. I would make education unaffordable. You know, terrorists don't like having educated people around. I would make health care difficult to get and let the insurance companies just get away with murder. I would listen to their telephone calls, monitor their emails, and use that information to really stick it to them. Then I would give myself a big old tax cut sit back in luxury, and watch them fight over the crumbs.
Are there any circumstances under which an individual is justified to blow up any building?
After you've evacuated it and you wanted to cover up the evidence. Other than that, let me talk about the racist aspect now. It's getting old. I'm getting real tired of being called a Klan member. I'm getting tired of being called a member of the Aryan Nations group. I spoke 2 weeks ago down at the Lincoln Memorial along with 2 other black people and the Jews for the Preservation of Firearms, and I believe there was somebody else Jewish who helped organize it, and the reports came out that a racist, anti-Semitic militia group held a rally on the Lincoln Memorial. Are these people blind, or is there an agenda afoot here?
You know, what I'm talking about is real angst, real fear and frustration and anger over the changing demographics of this country. This country is becoming less white every day. The Census Bureau says by 2050, whites will lose their majority. And, you know, the election of Barack Obama, the first black man, of course, in the White House,
there are more black people showing up every day. A lot of the things that these people sit around in these meetings, these so-called right-wing wackos, and talk about, happen daily in black communities. And black communities know this. The first people concerned seriously about neighborhood house-to-house searches and seizures were over in Chicago. They were black. Good grief, almost half the people in Waco who got killed were black. This movement isn't about guns and skin color. It's about liberty. It's about freedom. Amen. The same kind of legislation we're seeing coming down on everybody now came down on blacks just after the Civil War. That's why they're getting involved in this thing. And it's going to come eventually to somebody, you know, as you keep ignoring us and saying, well, these guys are just a bunch of angry white men. Well,
comparison, of course, is to the 90s when we saw so much activity from militias and other anti-government patriot groups. And, of course, that's the sector of the radical right. The other piece of it, as you suggested, is that a lot of it also is driven by conspiracy theories. The idea that the federal government has secret plans to put us into concentration camps.
Hypothetical, because you're making up Rosie O'Donnell-like scandals that says that 9/11 was an inside job.
Well, why are you not allowed to ask anything about it?
No,
why, when
concluding.
you approach the government, I approach the government.
I read everything possible.
Answers. Nobody wants to talk about it. This event that changed our entire history of our country. Why aren't we allowed to discuss it? Why aren't we allowed to ask questions? The moment you do, you get a reaction like he gave me. How dare you?
You said, talking about Fox and CNN and MSNBC, you said all the stories come from upstairs, even though the host pretend it's them. You know, people need to understand Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, and the rest of them. They're not these individual rogues setting their own agendas. These guys will deny it and say they have artistic freedom. You're either going to call me a lot. I'm telling you.
Wait a minute. So, in other words, you chose to talk about Anna Nicole Smith for a month and a half?
No, well, we didn't talk about the news.
It may be. What confuses me about the Tea Party is the Tea Party's willingness to accept the wingnuts, as you put it, without shaming them or defining more crisply what the Tea Party's agenda is relative to those who just want to kill black people, for instance.
So that's our fault that they're nuts?
No, it's not. It's your fault that you haven't shamed them, Mark. It is your fault that unlike the Democrats or the Republicans or any other political group. So you're saying you accept racists and Nazis, Mark? Is that what you're saying?
Question.
Do you accept racists and Nazis in the Tea Party?
Here in Sacramento at the NBC
Mark, I'm asking you a question, my man. You want to have a conversation with me, or did you just want to come on my TV show and do a commercial for yourself?
I'm answering the question. We have a woman here on a local NBC affiliate who, after an anti-Semitic rant at Sac State, was promoted from reporter to anchor. Does that make NBC? Does that make you an anti-Semitic organization?
Hey, Mark, do I run NBC? Are you a guest on my show? Do you have any intention of answering any of my questions? Let me ask you a question, Mark.
We don't
because I don't want to continue with this. You're wasting valuable oxygen. Can we please cut off this man's microphone? He has no interest in answering my questions. Mark, a pleasure.
Okay, see you.
Actually, not really a pleasure. It was offensive. You're offensive. Your treatment of my show as a vehicle to spread your propaganda, ignore my questions, offensive, and an indication of what is wrong with the dialogue in this country, period. Not to mention a group that would accept Nazis and racists.